This is Talent in the Age of AI, the podcast helping leaders navigate what AI means for their people, their culture, and their future. We talk with the thinkers and practitioners shaping how we work, learn, and lead, and what it takes to keep talent growing in a world that's constantly changing. We create, curate, and connect the insights and the community that helps leaders build AI confidence in themselves and in their teams. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Talent in the Age of AI podcast. I'm Wendy Wiseman, your host and one of the founders of our resource center. I want to say a special thanks before we begin to What's Good Productions at what'sgoodproductions.com, who enable us to make this podcast possible, and they're an amazing partner. Today, for our audience, we have someone I'm really pleased to present because the work he's done is completely academic on the acceptance of AI across cultures. And we can talk about what cultures and how it affects your organization, whether you're a multinational organization or not. Eric Strandt is the author and the researcher of a study called Cross-Cultural Differences in AI Acceptance Among Leaders, a UTAUT-based study of Western and Eastern perspectives. UTAUT is an acronym. It's about the unified theory of acceptance and use of technology. So that's out there among academicians, and this is created within those teaches at the college level. He's pursuing his PhD in global leadership and his Doctor of Business Administration. Both research tracks for these degrees center on AI adoption. So I think, Eric, whether you want to or not, you'll probably be a great resource we refer to time and time again to see what's your latest learning and how it affects what we're doing in our jobs every day. Your audience is HR leaders, talent and development leaders, executive leadership people, consultants in this field. So that's who you're addressing. And I know you have an academic study to relay, but tell us at the high level world, what did you glean from interviewing 434 people from basically East and West, and meaning the United States, Canada, and Asia, if I have that right?
Yes, you do. So it's a regional study looking at many different countries grouped into those two categories, East and West. So the question I wanted to answer here is relatively simple. So when leaders choose to adopt AI at work, do those reasons change across those cultures or across those regional groupings, right? And so what we found is that leadership across those regions both see value in AI. They both see, pretty consistent and definite value in AI. But the drivers of adoption are significantly different. And what that means is that an enterprise-wide rollout for an organization could miss on implementation because of those differences.
I love that term, drivers of adoption, meaning motivation and a person's why. And if that motivation is strong and the why is imperative, adoption is going to be higher. However, as I read your study, it's how they're adopting it and for what use. And the big difference is East and West for why they really want to use it and embrace it. Is that right?
Exactly, yeah. So in the results, what we found is that for Western leaders, their intention to adopt was driven the strongest by the ease of use and the usefulness that they perceived in AI. In Eastern leaders, that was a little bit different. So usefulness was definitely still important, but not as strong as it was for Western leaders. So in Eastern leaders, what was the strongest was organizational support and social influence, whether they were going to adopt AI or not. So significant measurable differences there in that intention to adopt.
Oh, it's so interesting. And it kind of is logical knowing the cultures a little bit as I do. So in the West, ease of use. If I might get on Chat, GPT, Gemini, it's going to be easy. Otherwise, I'm out. I mean, that's severe.
Right.
But in the East, What do you mean by organizational support and social influence? Will you expand on those?
Yeah, I can expand on both of those areas. And so, organizational support, different than facilitating conditions. So, facilitating condition is one of the UTOT constructs that we're measuring. Organizational support is more about the message coming from leadership. So, this is that organizational culture, that leadership message that's being put out to the organization, whether AI adoption is being embraced so people can feel good about it. They can feel like they're conforming to the organizational objectives.
I love that. I recently read, I do a lot of research in this area, that many employees want AI. They're waiting for their leaders to lead the way toward how, in America. Does that resonate?
Exactly, yep, and so especially in those eastern regions. So they're really looking for that leadership to give guidelines, and so that's one of the takeaways. If I was doing an enterprise-wide rollout, I would be looking at 2 different playbooks to do this rollout, and in Western culture, we would be prioritizing that user interface, like you said, right? That ease of use. It needs to be easy, it needs to be intuitive, right?
Right.
We would probably want to sort of have simple workflows, reducing as much friction as possible for those Western leaders. But if I was doing that rollout across multiple regions in those Eastern groups, I would prioritize that visible organizational sponsorship that we talked about, right? So where the leaders are supporting that as a part of the organizational culture, and I would probably implement some sort of peer mentorship or peer champions to really reinforce that AI is supported by the organization.
Oh, I love that. How does that dovetail with social influence, the motivation in the East?
So that second point was exactly supporting the social influence.
Oh,
So the social influence is peer support. So that they want to understand that the peers in their organizations, and in this case, we're looking at leaders in organizations, they want to understand that their peers are also embracing AI. They don't want to be the only ones doing it. They want to understand that this is a collective organizational objective, and their peers not only are doing it, but they want to. They want, their peers want to do it, and they want to have that support.
I kinda I heard it the other way, and I'm glad you clarified that I thought it was more like beating your chest that you're in it, and you can brag in social, and you can be the leader yourself, but I think in a more conforming organization, you need that security that you're not the only one.
Exactly.
Oh, okay, fantastic. I I love your idea of 2 playbooks, and I think it wouldn't be best for an organization, whether they're based in an Eastern country or Western, to just assume everybody is the same in their level and motivation of adoption. And how insightful. Many, many, many years ago, when the Nova car was introduced in America, they moved it to Latin America and kept the name Nova. Well, in Spanish, Nova means no va or doesn't go. And it's one of the classic examples in marketing that say, you gotta know your audience, right? It's kinda gets down to, who are we talking to here? Who do we want to do what? I think the people on this podcast listening in today, many come from multinationals, but many do not. Do you think that this has bleed into an organization in the West or in the East to understand that even there are levels of adoption among their, employee base of their company, whether it's multinational or not?
Absolutely. So I focused on these particular groups because of that strong contrast between those high context cultures and low context cultures and those different social norms. And so I wanted to be able to demonstrate meaningful differences. And I was able to achieve that with the results. But absolutely. So that doesn't mean that those are the only cultures that are going to, or regions, or how, whatever, are gonna play a difference, right? So even if you're only looking at the US, there's some significantly different expectations and cultures and ways that we could explore those. And so that's discussed in my study as recommendation for future studies. I'm looking at a future study that I'm just starting, looking at generational differences, because that can be very impactful. Generational differences even within the same organization.
Oh, yeah, people of my generation, a few, and not in my company, but I'm never gonna do that AI, whatever. I'm like, "Okay, you are, but you can keep saying that." Right? Because it's cultural now. It's here, it's arrived.
Right.
And here's what our audience also, not everybody's gonna lose their job. AI is not gonna replace everybody. And I think that myth story is finally dying down and we're understanding adoption. But what do you think about that immediate leap when AI came out was that it's gonna replace human beings?
Right. So I think that was a an eye-catching headline, right? That's sort of a false narrative that was stated without any scientific backing, anything like that. But it sort of catches the public view. And then I think that AI is very significant. I think we're just starting to skim the surface of what it's going to do and what it's going to look like in the future. So when I'm talking to my students, I like to put this in the context of spell check. So when spell check came out, Microsoft Word, or whatever software, spell check as a concept came out, there was some serious concern. People said it's gonna be the end of education. It's gonna be, nobody's gonna know how to spell or write anymore because it does it for you, right? But we, relatively quickly embraced the functionality of it, and it didn't ruin everything. College continued, right? It just changed things a little bit. The expectation on your assignments is now you're not gonna have any spelling errors because of spell check, right? And so with AI, it's, I believe that it will be similar, right? We will gradually grow to embrace AI, and our sort of expectations around that will change a little bit, but we'll have to see what that's gonna look like.
I think that's an interesting analogy because you still spell check isn't always right.
Right?
Some of its suggestions, you get to say ignore or no or yes. So you still have to run your brain through it, right? You have to look at what it says to you to do. And there's a in my business, marketing as the core is there was a man who coined the phrase woolly muffle strategies in, woolly muffle creative out. It's always input, right? And we're giving prompts to AI that are human. And it's giving us a lot, and we're having a conversation because it's fantastic. It says, "Would you like me to give you more? Would you like me to put it in as a PowerPoint?" And you're like, "Sure, have a good weekend." I talked to mine, but it still facilitates the need for me to run through what it has served to me, run it through my brain to determine if it's meaningful, relevant, what I wanted. And it's not perfect there too. And sometimes it can go down a rabbit hole of just being worse and worse and worse when you want it to be better and better and better because it's just not catching what you want. So I hope academic institutions won't be afraid of students using it. I hope businesses won't. I also read there's some businesses that forbid AI in the workplace, which is insane. In my opinion, people are gonna use it anyway. They have cell phones.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, what else was insightful in your study that you think our audience would benefit from knowing?
So what we looked at in the Utah framework was how leaders think the tool's helping performance, how easy it is to use, and if peers and leaders are encouraging it. And those are the four groupings, and then that leads to intention to adopt. That was the outcome that we were looking at.
Do you think an organization here, run or led by one of the viewers here, they could work with you to do a survey among their own employees to answer those questions and understand their own base today versus assuming?
Absolutely. So it would be framed a little bit differently. We might use a different framework, but potentially not. It depends, what we're looking for. But absolutely. So understanding that internal expectation before doing a rollout of AI can be very expensive, right? We hear about these companies spending billions. Those are, huge corporations. But for any organization, it can be expensive, and not just in if you're just rolling out a subscription to ChatGPT, that doesn't seem very expensive, right? But when we look at the labor involved and the training involved and the understanding and the rework and the time, it's getting expensive in labor cost. And so understanding that upfront would absolutely be beneficial, and it would give leaders the areas to focus in on in training, user interface, things like that.
Yeah, usability, right? So the old days were when websites were created and you needed usability experts to come in and say, let's build it so it works for the human, maybe not the programmer on the back end. That's a little too close to O's and ones. I know of companies that are building their own AI for security reasons, right? And I understand that. But in my experience and the people I know, the company has built it over here. And then they go da 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 da, we have it. And to your point, now you guys just have to learn it because we built it based on what we think on your adoption level and your motivation level. And so could be a difference in companies that want their own or that want AI out there, generative AI, to help them meet their goals of productivity and revenue, right?
That was a great example and very well put. So I've worked on both sides of that spectrum, or both sides of that fence in development and in the business side. And it is very hard to get from one to the other one. You really need so, someone in the middle, a business analyst, closely working with the team to understand, because that has happened a lot, especially early on, like you said, when the internet and early computers and things like that. The programmers built it for programmers. They built it to be easy to program. They built it for things like that. And that doesn't work for the business user. So same thing in AI. Yep. When corporations are developing their own AI, it is critical to develop it around the user and the purpose of it.
And even if they're not building their own, but they green light use of it and embracing it, let's just make sure that there are maybe are guidelines on how we'd like you to use it. We want you to prove to us, assure to us that your prompts were relevant, but that you reviewed what it gave you before you present it to a division within our company to use, because we need to know it's kind of validated or it makes sense to us, right? Guidelines or something.
Right. Absolutely. Guidelines were a concern. So on that note, in addition to our Utah framework, we also included open-ended questions. We didn't want to make this into a qualitative study with all open-ended, but we wanted to be able to reinforce the findings, double check the findings through open-ended questions. And so my my co-author, Dr. Murnane Rainey, was invaluable in that thematic analysis of the results. And what we found in there, so the results did reinforce, exactly our findings, the findings that we discussed from Utah. But we also found that on both sides, both regions, ethics and privacy came up significantly. So ethics and privacy around the governance, and both sides had over reliance concerns. So just like we're talking, people are worried about, if we trust everything in AI, then
Where is the
what happens
human,
to the people, right?
right? Yeah.
And
I
so
love that. You used the term playbook earlier.
right, exactly. So in the playbook, what I would look at for those particular concerns would be making sure that the responsibility of decisions stays with a human. We're not we're not making not right now, right? We're not making AI the manager, the leader, right? They're not replacing leadership decisions. So reinforcing and sharing the information that a human is in the loop in all AI workflows really helps to reduce that concern among those concerns that were in both regions.
Like, maybe name your chat, whatever, but refer to her as your research assistant
Yeah.
or your or your business analyst, but you'll be the one to determine how relevant and current it is and, needed by the organization. How do people access your survey, your study?
So I believe you're gonna send out the link to that study.
Yeah,
It was
if that
it
yeah.
was published in Wiley, and it was recently used in a international symposium, and it was discussed as one of the studies. And so it is out there, and there's getting to be more and more studies on the subject, right? It's a hot topic right now, as you said, as it should be. And so I was very happy that this study could sort of contribute to that body of research.
Yeah, congratulations on that. A lot of people are talking now there's gonna be an AI bubble. Do you believe that?
If
The
there's
bubble will burst. Sorry.
Yep. If there is, I think it's not gonna be around the use of AI. I don't think the usefulness is going to go away. I think the adoption and the interest is going to increase. What I think is that the computational the computational spend that's going on right now. So we're talking about the data centers. So we're having, hundreds of billions of dollars going into data centers. And we can think about that in sort of terms of early computers. When the first computer came out, it filled up a room, right? And then corporations would spend all this money getting, the latest tech, right? So that's sort of where we're at. We're building these massive data centers, and technology is going to change and improve because it always does. And then we'll be left with these, multi-billion dollar data centers that aren't needed anymore. And so I would expect that that's where the bubble would be, and it would have an economic impact, but I don't see that reducing the interest in using AI.
I think the train has left the station, right? I, recently participated in a chili cook-off, and people call me cheater, but I asked AI, "How do I make the best of Hormel chili?" And by the way, I won.
And
So
that's what I was gonna say. It worked for you, yeah.
yeah, so it's the small things in life, but it is the very serious big things in life in an organization. The study is called the Cross-Cultural Differences in AI Acceptance Among Leaders, a Utah-based study of Western and Eastern perspectives. The authors are Eric Strandt and Dr. Jennifer Murnane Rainey. It's available to you. We'll give a link on our podcast, and we hope that you will read it. And whether you're a multinational corporation or not, a nonprofit, et cetera, it really does give insight into really understanding first the adoption level of your employee base. And clearly, not everybody's on that same plane. It might have some age or a split. It may not. Your corporation is your own. But I know Eric Strant, soon to be doctor, would be happy to join with you in helping understand where your organization sits. And I'm hoping we're having a webinar planned soon to also participate, and we'll let you know about that. Eric, any last words you want to say?
I'd say keep at it. I think we're on something new right now with AI, right? And it's challenging and it's expensive, but continue embracing it because it can add value.
Well, your study proves that. It's just at what level do you start? Where do you enter? And
Right.
for what reason, right?
And it's very, very personal to each organization, and yep. And so starting off with the study is a great way to do it.
I thank you for sharing it with us and taking the time to give us the high level. You're a great academician, and I'm not, so I love understanding it on a level. But you know your user, and that's me.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was really fun chatting with you about this.
You too. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Talent in the Age of AI. If this conversation gave you new ways to grow in your own work and to better support your people, follow the show and share it with others in your HR and talent network. Members get even more: full episode transcripts, extended show notes, and companion resources to help you put these insights into action. Learn more and join us at talentintheageofai.com. We're here to help leaders create, curate, and connect what's needed to build tomorrow's workforce today. See you next time.